What if two simple sentences could shift your entire reality and place you on the timeline where your lottery win is already done? Stay with me, because today you will learn the exact two-sentence formula that people say has changed their financial destiny forever. In this video, you will discover a powerful two-sentence formula that reshapes your inner state so completely that your outer world must obey. This method aligns your imagination, emotion, and assumption with the timeline where abundance is already yours. If you are ready to transform your financial reality, you're in the right place. The real power behind the two-sentence formula is not in the arrangement of words, but in the profound internal shift those words initiate when spoken from awareness rather than repetition. Most people speak desires from a place of longing, from a place of distance, from the assumption that what they want is somewhere out there, separate, delayed, inaccessible until some external condition changes. These two sentences interrupt that habit entirely. They trigger a reversal in the inner movement of thought and emotion, shifting you out of the posture of waiting and into the posture of receiving. They serve as a doorway to a new state of being, a state in which the experience you seek is no longer imagined as future, but accepted as present. When spoken with genuine conviction, the sentences collapse every mental barrier that once separated you from the outcome. They silence the part of the mind that constantly questions, analyzes, and doubts. They lift you out of the realm of effort and place you squarely into the realm of embodiment. Most people do not realize that the majority of their thoughts about manifestation are actually thoughts of lack. When you desire something but feel the gap between you and the fulfillment of that desire, every affirmation becomes a reminder of what you do not yet have. The two-sentence formula eliminates that gap instantly. Instead of focusing on the desire, you focus on the conclusion, the state of already having. This is why these sentences are transformational. They bypass the analytical mind entirely. They do not negotiate with the ego, they do not bargain with circumstance, and they do not request permission from reality. They declare a finished outcome, and the act of declaring it breaks the spell of limitation. The shift they produce is not intellectual, it is experiential. You can feel it when it happens. A calmness arises, a deep inner certainty that has no logical explanation. It is a knowing that stands independent of physical evidence. The sentences carry the power to move you from imagining the desire as a hope to imagining it as an accomplished fact. In that instant, your consciousness aligns with the end state, and once consciousness accepts a state as true, external reality begins reflecting it back to you with astonishing accuracy. The sentences work because the subconscious mind does not argue with a state that feels natural. It absorbs it, nurtures it, and expresses it. When you speak these sentences, you are not trying to force belief. You are shifting identity. You are stepping into the version of yourself who has already crossed the finish line. You are moving from the stance of a seeker to the stance of a possessor. That movement is the secret. The words are the key, but the door they open is your own transformed awareness. When you embody the end, you speak, think, and react differently. Your emotional climate changes. You stop checking for signs because there is nothing to check. Your inner world is settled. And when the inner world is settled, the outer world must reorganize itself around that new inner certainty. This is why the formula is so potent for outcomes such as financial breakthroughs, lottery wins, and sudden increases in prosperity. Those are events that typically feel too big for the logical mind to accept. The mind insists on probability and logic, but the formula bypasses logic altogether. By accepting the end as real, you accept the identity of the person for whom such an event is normal. Extraordinary outcomes require extraordinary states of consciousness, not extraordinary effort. These sentences transport you into that elevated state with clarity and speed. The transformation begins when you realize that consciousness is the only creative power you ever use. You do not manipulate external events. You select inner states. The two-sentence formula is a mechanism for selecting the state of fulfillment with precision. It is like tuning a radio to the frequency where the signal comes through clearly. Before speaking the sentences, you may be tuned to lack anticipation or disbelief. After speaking them with awareness, you tune into the frequency of completion. And once you remain on that frequency long enough, physical reality has no choice but to mirror it. The sentences also dismantle the internal narrative that insists manifestation must be difficult, slow, or earned. They strip away the idea that receiving requires hustle or strain. They replace uncertainty with certainty, confusion with clarity, and striving with knowing. The more you speak them from the end state, the more your relationship to your desire softens. Instead of feeling like something you are chasing, it becomes something that is already yours, something inevitable, something settled long before it appears. The key is the shift in feeling. The words alone are not enough, but when the words generate the feeling of completion, you step across an invisible threshold. From that moment forward, you begin living from the new state rather than striving toward it. The outer world may take time to catch up, but your inner world is already rewritten. And because consciousness is the root from which all physical expression grows, the new outer result becomes unavoidable. That is the true power behind the two-sentence formula. It is a simple, immediate way to step into the reality you desire now, without waiting for signs, without waiting for permission, and without needing to understand how it will unfold. It lifts you into the only creative position that exists, the position of already having. From that position, every desire becomes not a question, but a completed certainty awaiting its appointed hour to appear. The two-sentence formula works because it redirects your attention to the only place where true transformation occurs, the end. Most people get caught in the mechanics of manifestation. They want to know which numbers to pick, which method to use, which ritual carries the most power. They become obsessed with the pathway, forgetting that the pathway is never the source. The pathway is only the effect. The cause is always the inner state, and the inner state is formed by what you accept as already accomplished. When you focus on the end rather than the process, you remove yourself from the friction of trying. Trying implies separation. Trying says, I am here and the result is somewhere out there. The formula dissolves that separation because its sentences speak from completion. They do not describe a journey. They declare a destination. They imprint the subconscious with the assumption that the event is finalized. The moment the subconscious accepts the end as real, it automatically orchestrates the bridge that leads you there without your conscious interference. The mind loves steps, but steps slow you down. Steps invite doubt because you measure your progress, question your timing, worry about whether anything is happening. When you skip the steps mentally and land squarely in the final outcome, you bypass every layer of resistance. You step into a state where the win is not something you but something that has already occurred in the unseen. This shift is subtle yet powerful. It places you in a vibrational and psychological alignment that the outer world must eventually reflect. When you direct your focus to the final state, you leave behind the thought patterns that contradict your desire. The formula's words hold no instructions, no requests, no timelines. They simply imprint completion. And by doing so, they silence the internal dialogue that asks, when is it coming? What if it doesn't happen? Am I doing this right? Those questions die instantly when the end becomes the only reality you acknowledge. You cannot worry about something that has already happened. You cannot doubt an outcome that you have accepted as finished. This is why the formula is so effective. If it shifts you into identity rather than effort. The person who has already won does not visualize numbers, does not chase signs, does not search for validation. The person who has already won simply knows. That knowing is the secret ingredient that alters your emotional climate. It brings a sense of calm certainty, a quiet satisfaction, a soft release of tension. When you feel the end as present, you no longer hold yourself in the vibration of longing. You exit the state of wanting and enter the state of having. The end creates its own momentum. When you embrace it internally, your imagination stops projecting the desire into the distance. Instead, it pulls the experience into the now. That internal now is the birthplace of manifestation. Outer reality cannot form around a desire that is always perceived as not yet. But when you accept the end as present, the inner world prepares a space for it, and the outer world moves to fill that space with physical evidence. What makes this approach so liberating is that it removes all pressure. You do not need to know how a lottery win could unfold for you. You do not need to understand probabilities or mechanics. You are engaging with a principle far deeper than logic. When you hold the end in your imagination with emotional conviction, your subconscious, limitless by nature, takes command. It finds pathways that your rational mind could never conceive. It rearranges circumstances, inspires you at the right moment, nudges events into alignment. You are no longer the struggler, you are the receiver. Focusing on the end requires trust, but not the kind of trust that waits anxiously for proof. It is the trust that comes from embodying a truth so deeply that external confirmation becomes irrelevant. You are not waiting for the win to convince you. You are living from the win as though it has already convinced you. That subtle inversion is the key. Instead of the physical event creating belief, the belief creates the physical event. By not engaging with the process, you protect your desire from contamination by doubt. The mind cannot sabotage what it cannot analyze. When you offer it no logistical details, it has nothing to question. All it can do is submit to the state you are impressing upon it. That state, once accepted, becomes dominant. And once dominant, it must express itself in your world. Entering the end long before the result appears is not delusion, it is creation. Every outcome first exists in consciousness as an assumption. Every victory is born as a feeling before it becomes a fact. When you dwell in the end, you are creating the inner blueprint that reality must follow. You are stepping into the consciousness of the winner, and consciousness always precedes form. This is why the formula reveals the end rather than the process. The end is the power. The end is the seed. The end is the command that sets everything else into motion. When you claim the end as real, the process becomes effortless because it is no longer your responsibility. Your only role is to maintain the knowing that the end is already accomplished. And when that knowing becomes your natural state, life aligns itself to mirror what you have already accepted within. Sentence 1 is the foundation upon which the entire formula stands, because it pulls you out of the mindset of striving and places you directly into the consciousness of fulfillment. When you say, "It happened," you are not speaking as a wishful thinker or someone hoping for a lucky break. You are speaking as the version of yourself who has crossed the finish line, who has seen the desired outcome materialize, and who is now reflecting on it as something already done. This shift is far more powerful than most people realize, because it breaks the psychological pattern of waiting and yearning. Waiting creates distance, yearning creates tension. Declaring "it happened" collapses both. It brings the event into the immediacy of now. The human mind is accustomed to operating in timelines. It sorts experiences into past, present, and future. Most desires live in the future category, and as long as they remain there, the mind treats them as something incomplete, something you must chase, think about, or plan for. But the moment you declare, "It happened," you override the mind's habitual structure. You pull the desire out of the future drawer and place it firmly in the past accomplished file. And once the mind accepts a thing as completed, it stops generating resistance. It no longer analyzes doubts or worries. It no longer asks when or how or whether. It relaxes into the truth of completion. This internal relaxation is the fertile soil in which manifestation roots itself. When you say, "It happened," the goal is not to repeat empty words. The power is in the awareness behind the words. It is the awareness that says, "I am no longer in pursuit. This event is already part of my story." You speak from the emotional memory of accomplishment, This is what quiets the mind. It is not the sentence alone. It is the identity shift the sentence triggers. You move from the identity of a seeker to the identity of someone who already possesses the very thing they once desired. In that instant, you become the cause, not the chaser. You become the source, not the follower. And reality must respond accordingly. Most people approach their desires with subtle inner tension. They want something so badly that the wanting becomes a signal of lack. They visualize, they affirm, they hope, but all from the standpoint of someone who does not yet have what they desire. This creates an internal contradiction that makes results feel slow or inconsistent. The sentence, "it happened," cuts through that contradiction. It bridges the gap between desire and fulfillment immediately. Even if you only hold the feeling for a few seconds at first, you are training your consciousness to adopt a new position. Each repetition strengthens the neural and emotional pathways that associate your desire with completion rather than longing. Saying, "it happened," also taps into the natural power of retrospection. When you think about events in your past, graduations, relationships, opportunities, you remember them with certainty. You do not question whether they occurred. You do not revisit the emotional struggle it took to reach them. You simply recall them as factual components of your life story. This is the energy you harness when you declare, "it happened." You are treating your desire as a memory rather than a dream, as an established chapter rather than one yet to be written. This perspective grounds the desire in certainty, and certainty is one of the strongest creative forces you have. Consider the emotional posture of someone who has just achieved something significant. There is a sense of inevitability, as though the win feels natural in hindsight. There is no strain or disbelief, only acknowledgement. When you speak, "it happened," embody that quiet inevitability. Feel the sense of completion, the calm satisfaction, the inner exhale that comes when something you long for is now secured. This is not about explosive excitement. It is about the deep inner knowing that the event is done. And this knowing becomes the magnetic pulse that draws the physical evidence into your outer world. At first, your logical mind may resist. It may say, "but it hasn't happened yet." That is expected. Your logical mind works from sensory data, not from inner assumption. You are not trying to argue with your senses. You are training your consciousness to lead your senses. Every shift in identity begins this way, before physical proof appears. The key is persistence. Each time you declare, "it happened," you gently realign your inner world. You are reminding yourself of the truth you have chosen. Eventually, the sentence sinks deeper than logic. It becomes a felt reality, a natural state of being. And once it becomes natural within, the external confirmation is inevitable. Think of "it happened" as the moment you sign the internal contract. You are agreeing with your future self. You are acknowledging that the outcome is secured and that your only role now is to embody the person for whom this result is normal. There is extraordinary power in this simplicity. When spoken correctly, the sentence removes resistance, dissolves fear, and eliminates the chase. It centers you in the end, where every desire already exists in its completed form. When you allow yourself to inhabit that end, even briefly, you unlock a creative energy that begins arranging the external world with precision. The bridge of events begins to unfold, not because you forced it, but because your inner acceptance made it unavoidable. The declaration, "it happened," is the spark. It is the moment you step into the reality where your desire is already fact. And once you step there internally, reality must reflect that truth back to you. Thank you. Two words so small, yet powerful enough to dissolve years of resistance, worry, and disbelief. This sentence is not merely an expression of manners. It is an energetic declaration that your desire has already been received. Gratitude is the only emotional state that cannot be faked without shifting something inside you. The moment you say, "thank you," with genuine feeling, your mind and body soften into acceptance. You are no longer asking. You are acknowledging. You are no longer striving. You are resting in fulfillment. These two words finalize the inner transaction. They close the gap between where you stand and where you long to be, because gratitude does not live in the future. Gratitude speaks from completion. When you say, thank you, you are speaking as someone to whom the event has already occurred. Most people repeat affirmations from a place of lack. They hope the words will one day become true. But thank you requires you to inhabit a different state altogether. You must imagine, even if only for a moment, that the manifestation is real, present, and yours. That subtle shift is everything. It signals to your subconscious that the desire is not something to chase, but something already attained. The subconscious does not argue. It does not analyze. It does not rationalize. It simply accepts and reproduces the emotional blueprint you give it. When the blueprint is gratitude, the subconscious takes it as evidence of fulfillment. This is why thank you is such a profound second sentence. It seals the assumption and locks it in place more firmly than any long affirmation ever could. Think of the last time you received something meaningful, a gift, an opportunity, a blessing. Your thank you in that moment was effortless because it was paired with the emotional reality of having received. You were not hoping to receive. You were acknowledging that you already had. That is the exact emotional tone you are summoning when you use this formula. You are recreating the internal experience of having received the winning result. The body recognizes this tone. The heart recognizes it. The subconscious recognizes it. And the external world must eventually reorganize to match that internal state. When you say, thank you, allow the words to be slow, deliberate, and sincere. Let them settle in your chest. Let them shift your breathing, your posture, your expectations. Notice how your shoulders relax, how your mind quiets, how your heartbeat steadies. Gratitude is the emotional signature of someone who already holds what they desire. You are stepping into that identity every time you speak these words with intention. It is not about excitement or forced enthusiasm. It is about quiet certainty. It is the inner nod that says, it is done. You do not need fireworks, you need acceptance. This sentence also neutralizes fear. Fear only arises when you believe something can be taken from you or withheld. Gratitude eliminates this belief. You cannot feel grateful and fearful at the same moment. When gratitude takes over, fear loses its footing. Doubt dissolves because gratitude does not ask questions. It rests in the answer. It assumes safety. It assumes abundance. It assumes completion. Because of this, the emotional field around you changes. You stop grasping, stop checking, stop waiting. You enter the state of someone who knows the outcome is inevitable. Thank you also removes the urgency that often blocks manifestations. Urgency screams that the desire is not here yet and may never come. Gratitude whispers, it already arrived. This whisper is far more powerful than the loudest plea. Pleading pushes your desire away. Gratitude pulls it close. You cannot beg and receive at the same time, but you can receive and appreciate simultaneously. Appreciation is the language of fulfillment. When you consistently practice this inner gratitude, life begins to reflect it back. You will notice small signals at first, unexpected money, subtle opportunities, coincidences that align with your desire. These are not accidents. They are the shadows cast by the inner state you have adopted. Gratitude opens doors that effort alone cannot. It softens resistance. It aligns timelines. It brings forth outcomes that logic cannot explain. You are no longer forcing reality, you are inviting it. Let the words, thank you, become your emotional home. Whisper them in moments of quiet. Repeat them when doubt tries to enter. Use them when your mind attempts to analyze or question. Each time you say them, return to the feeling of having already received. Hold the sensation of relief, the ease, the contentment. Feel as though the winning moment has already happened and you are simply acknowledging the blessing. This feeling is the bridge to the manifestation itself. You are not repeating the sentence to attract something. You are repeating it to remind yourself of who you are in this moment, the one who has already been given what they asked for. Gratitude stabilizes that identity. It keeps you aligned with fulfillment instead of longing. It is the emotional signature that communicates with the unseen side of reality, telling it clearly, I have received. And reality responds in kind. When spoken correctly, with sincerity and embodiment, thank you becomes the most powerful affirmation you can use. It carries the vibration of completion. It anchors you in the state where your desire is already an established fact. And from that state, the external world has no choice but to reveal the version of reality that matches your inner knowing. To speak these sentences as the person who has already won is to cross an invisible threshold, a shift so profound that your inner world no longer resembles the one you lived in moments before. This is not an act of pretending, nor is it a performance. It is an inner relocation, a movement of awareness from the version of yourself who desires, hopes, and strains, into the version of yourself who possesses, enjoys, and reflects on the fulfillment as something already secured. When you speak from this identity, everything changes, even before anything changes. Begin by recognizing that every desire has two possible states, wanting it and having it. Most people speak their affirmations from the first state, the state of lack, where the unspoken truth beneath their words is, I do not have this yet, but I wish I did. The subconscious does not respond to the surface of the sentence, it responds to the emotional posture beneath it. When the emotional signature is one of longing, the outer world must continue to reflect that longing. This is why speaking from desperation never produces the desired outcome. Desperation is evidence that you are identifying with the version of yourself who still sees the desire as distant. Shift your awareness to the second state, the state of possession. This is the consciousness of someone who already crossed the finish line, who already received the call, who already held the winning numbers in their hands. When you speak the two sentences from this state, your voice changes, your breathing changes, your internal chemistry changes. These are not subtle shifts, they are powerful markers that your subconscious recognizes as the truth it must express. Picture for a moment the you who has already won. Not the fantasy, not the daydream, but the identity, the inner psychology of triumph. How does this version of you wake up in the morning? How does this version carry themselves? There is a softness in the shoulders, a clarity in the eyes, a grounded sense of assurance. This version of you is not reaching forward, they are reflecting backward. They are not hoping, they are remembering. They do not ask whether it will happen, they rest in the knowledge that it already did. Now bring this version of you into your present awareness. Let the feeling of relief wash through your chest, the feeling that life has just shifted in your favor in an irreversible way. Let the disbelief rise softly, not as doubt, but as awe. An awe that something extraordinary has unfolded. Let the joy bloom quietly, not as frantic excitement, but as a deep, warm satisfaction. These emotions are not theatrics, they are indicators that your identity is aligning with the fulfilled version of you. When you say the words, it happened, from this identity, the statement carries weight. It does not feel like wishful thinking. It feels like a recognition, an inward nod to a truth that has already unfolded. And when you follow it with thank you, it is not a plea for blessings, but the natural gratitude of someone who has received them. Speaking from this identity also reshapes your physical body. Your posture becomes more open. Your breathing slows. Your mind becomes quieter because it no longer needs to calculate or strategize. Your body recognizes that the battle is over and the victory is secured. This somatic shift is a vital part of the process because your subconscious reads your body far more clearly than your words. A calm body, a steady breath, and a posture of assurance communicate fulfillment in a way that language alone cannot. Another powerful effect of speaking from the fulfilled identity is how it dissolves fear. Fear only exists in the gap between where you are and where you desire to be. When you collapse that gap internally, when you become the person who has already succeeded, fear loses its grip entirely. There is nothing left to fear because the outcome is settled. This state of completion creates a vibrational consistency that naturally aligns your outer world. Opportunities, ideas, impulses, and synchronicities arise from this stable inner knowing. Speaking from the identity of already having won also transforms your relationship with time. You no longer wait for the moment, you live from it. You do not count down days or analyze signs. You walk through your life with the quiet confidence of someone whose success is inevitable. Every moment becomes infused with the energy of completion. This is why external reality begins to rearrange itself. Because you are no longer acting like the person who wants, you are acting like the person who has. The world mirrors identity with precision. When you shift your identity, the mirror must change its reflection. This is not theory, it is law. Identity precedes expression. Identity precedes circumstances. Identity precedes evidence. When the identity is stable, the evidence has no choice but to appear. This is why speaking the two-sentence formula from the identity of the fulfilled version of yourself is the turning point. It is the moment the desire stops being a request and becomes a declaration. It is the moment your inner world moves into alignment and your outer world begins its inevitable transformation. The sentences themselves are simple, but the identity you speak them from is the true engine of manifestation. When you embody the version of yourself who has already won, you do not chase the outcome. It comes to you. You do not look for proof. The proof emerges. And you do not wait for the moment. The moment waits for you because you are already living in it. Repeating the two sentences is not an act of force. It is an act of internal alignment. You are not attempting to overpower doubt or wrestle your way into belief. Instead, you are steadily nurturing a state of certainty from the inside out. Every repetition is a gentle invitation for your subconscious mind to relax into the truth you are presenting. When you whisper, "It happened," and "Thank you," you are not trying to make something occur. You are choosing to embody the reality where it already has. This distinction is crucial. Convincing leads to tension. Stabilizing leads to transformation. With each repetition, you are carving a new mental groove. At first, the phrases may feel foreign, as though you are speaking about someone else's life. That is natural. Your old assumptions about money, luck, and possibility have been rehearsed for years, perhaps decades. They feel familiar because you have lived inside them. But repetition is the tool that dissolves familiarity with limitation and replaces it with familiarity with abundance. You are teaching your inner world a new language, the language of completion rather than desire, the language of possession rather than pursuit. As you softly repeat the sentences, something subtle begins to happen. Your internal atmosphere shifts. What once felt like imagination begins to feel like memory. "It happened" starts to carry a weight, a substance, a quiet authority. You no longer feel as though you are reaching for an experience. Instead, you feel the experience settling around you, expanding within you. This is not emotional hype. It is a deep-rooted steadiness, a calm certainty, a sense that the desire is no longer a question, but a fact waiting to express. The subconscious accepts what is repeated in a relaxed, receptive state. That is why the tone of your repetition matters. Do not rush, do not strain. Let each sentence fall gently, as though spoken from a place of completion, not from need. Say it as though you are recalling an event that already unfolded in your favor. When the repetition carries this energy, resistance dissolves. The subconscious does not argue with what feels natural. It simply creates the outer conditions that align with it. There will come a moment when the sentences stop feeling like affirmations and start feeling like simple statements of truth. This is the breakthrough point. It may not come with fireworks or dramatic emotion. Often it is quiet. You may notice that your body relaxes, your breathing deepens, or your mind stops asking when. These subtle cues signal that the inner shift has taken root. You tip the balance of belief. You move from the identity of the seeker to the identity of the receiver. Continue the repetition not because you lack evidence, but because you enjoy the feeling of being aligned with the end. The goal is not to create excitement, but to stabilize certainty. Excitement is temporary, certainty is transformative. When the feeling of "it happened" becomes your emotional baseline, the outer world has no choice but to conform. Reality is a mirror, and once the reflection within is stable, the reflection without reorganizes itself accordingly. Many people expect instant emotional fireworks, but this practice is more like settling into a new life within yourself. The more you repeat the sentences, the more you begin to notice subtle changes in your perspective. Doubt loses its grip. Worry becomes irrelevant. The urge to check, confirm, or measure your progress fades. You move through your day with a quiet knowing that something is already resolved. This internal shift is the true manifestation. The external event is simply the final echo. Repetition stabilizes identity. Every time you speak the sentences, you are reinforcing the version of yourself who already possesses the outcome. This is why the outer world eventually bends to match. It does not change because of the words alone. It changes because the words create a new state of being. When your state changes, your actions, expectations, intuitions, and opportunities naturally shift. What once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. You begin to live from the inner architecture of abundance rather than the fragile structure of hope. Continue until the feeling becomes natural. Naturalness is the key. When the desire feels normal, when the outcome feels expected, when the win feels like something that belongs to you, you have stabilized the state. At that point, nothing in the outer world can contradict what you know internally. Even if circumstances appear unchanged, the certainty within does not shake. You no longer look for signs, you become the sign. The two sentences are no longer tools. You have become the embodiment of their truth. This is the power of repeating until the feeling stabilizes. It reshapes your internal world so completely that the external world must follow. What you accept as real within inevitably expresses itself without. Release the how and hold the end. This is the moment you stop wrestling with reality and begin allowing it to reorganize itself around your conviction. Most people sabotage their own manifestations, not because they lack desire, but because they cannot surrender control. They believe that if they do not consciously engineer every step, the outcome will not occur. Yet this belief alone is the barrier. The truth is that the road to your desire is never your responsibility. Your only task is to claim the end result internally with such fullness and such certainty that the outer world must conform. When you stop trying to dictate the mechanism, you give life permission to flow in ways you could never predict. The mind, no matter how intelligent, operates with limited information. It knows what it has seen, what it has heard, and what it has experienced, but the unseen channels are infinite. Opportunities exist outside your current awareness. Connections, conversations, unexpected turns. These are all pieces of a larger orchestration that you cannot consciously assemble. By insisting on how the manifestation must unfold, you restrict the very power that is attempting to deliver it. Holding the end means living from the assumption that the desire is already yours, that the result is already completed, that the outcome is not coming, it has arrived. When you do this, a remarkable shift occurs within you. Tension dissolves, anxiety releases. The need to chase, force, or manipulate fades. You begin to operate from a calm, grounded certainty. That certainty is magnetic. It reorganizes your thoughts, sharpens your intuition, and draws to you the circumstances required for the fulfillment of your assumption. This inner posture is far more powerful than any action taken from fear or urgency. When you hold the end, your state is aligned with the outcome. When your state is aligned, the bridge of events that leads you to that outcome becomes effortless. This bridge is not something you build, it's something you walk. It unfolds naturally below your feet as you move through your days. You may not recognize it at first. It may appear ordinary. A conversation, a sudden impulse, a new idea, an unexpected delay. Every piece is part of the larger pattern guiding you toward the realization of what you have already accepted as yours. Letting go of the how does not mean you become passive. It means you become receptive. You act not from panic, but from inspiration. You move not from pressure, but from inner knowing. Actions that once felt confusing or overwhelming now become obvious because they arise from alignment, not from fear. The bridge of events will always contain movement, but that movement flows effortlessly when you stop trying to dictate the path. Trying to control the mechanism stems from doubt. Doubt whispers that if you do not micromanage reality, nothing will happen. Doubt insists that the end is fragile, unstable, easily lost. But the end you hold in imagination is far more secure than anything you could force through external effort. Doubt wants you to analyze, question, and overthink. It wants you to measure progress, look for signs, and constantly check whether things are working. But the moment you begin checking, you are no longer in the end. You have stepped back into the state of waiting, wanting, and hoping, states that cannot produce fulfillment. Staying in the knowing means refusing to compromise your certainty. It means treating the invisible as more real than the visible. It means recognizing that the unseen reality is already complete, already established, already unfolding. When you remain in this attitude, nothing can disturb your peace. Delays lose their power. Obstacles stop appearing as threats. Instead, they become neutral moments along a path that is already guaranteed to bring you to your destination. You begin to understand that everything is working for you, even when appearances temporarily suggest otherwise. Surrendering the how also unlocks a profound sense of freedom. You no longer carry the weight of making everything happen. You no longer wake with the burden of strategizing your way into abundance. Instead, you move through your day with clarity and openness, trusting that the right ideas, opportunities, and people will intersect with your path at the perfect time. This trust is not blind. It is rooted in your inner conviction. It is the natural byproduct of living from the end. When you hold the end with unwavering consistency, you become immune to external noise. You no longer react to circumstances that do not yet reflect your assumption. You understand that they are simply remnants of old states, dissolving as the new state takes form. You do not panic when the outer world lags behind. You know it must eventually reflect your inner acceptance. Reality is not leading, you are. You are the cause, and the world is the effect. Allowing the bridge of events to unfold without interference is a form of mastery. It means you understand that fulfillment is inevitable. It means you trust the unseen power working behind the scenes. It means you know the end so deeply that nothing can persuade you otherwise. And when that end becomes your dwelling place, life responds with precision, elegance, and often with astonishing speed. Release the how and hold the end. Let the bridge build itself. Your only responsibility is to remain in the certainty of the fulfilled desire. Everything else will align in ways more perfect than anything you could have planned. Live the day as the one whose desire is fulfilled. This is where true transformation begins. Not in the brief moments of visualization, not in the isolated affirmations spoken in silence, but in the continuous embodiment of the end. When you wake up, step into the identity of the person who already holds the winning ticket, already feels the surge of joy, already knows that their financial breakthrough is complete. This is not an act of pretending. It is the deliberate choice to relocate your consciousness. You are not trying to become the version of you who has won. You are operating as that version now. As you move into your morning, let your thoughts reflect the security, the confidence, and the gratitude of someone who has already received what they once desired. Notice how differently you breathe when the outcome is already settled. Notice how your body relaxes when the question of, will it happen, no longer exists. When the end is secure in your mind, every concern that previously occupied your attention begins to dissolve. You stop seeking signs because you no longer need reassurance. You walk through the world knowing the fulfillment is in motion, and the physical confirmation is only a matter of unfolding. Your speech becomes more powerful in this state. You no longer speak from lack or fear. Every word carries the tone of someone who has crossed the threshold into abundance. Complaints fade, doubts fall away. Conversations shift from what is missing to what is expanding. When you adopt the language of completion, you broadcast a frequency that aligns with the outcome you have already claimed internally. You are no longer a seeker, you are a receiver. The world responds accordingly. Your actions also become aligned with this new identity. You naturally choose behaviors that reflect confidence and clarity. Perhaps you organize your finances with a sense of empowerment instead of dread. Perhaps you make decisions with a calm certainty rather than hesitation. The version of you who has already experienced the win is not frantic, not doubtful, not insecure. They move with ease. They expect good news. They trust the unseen currents working on their behalf. This shift in behavior is not forced, it flows from the inner, knowing that the desire is already fulfilled. As you continue living from this end state, you will feel the subtle but powerful difference between wanting and having. Wanting carries tension, effort, and distance. Having carries relaxation, gratitude, and immediacy. The moment you anchor yourself in the feeling of having, your day takes on a new texture. What once appeared ordinary becomes infused with meaning. What once felt heavy now feels light. You move through your routine with a quiet joy, as though you hold a secret that the world has not yet seen. But you know it will soon reveal itself. Even challenges feel different when you live from the fulfilled state. Instead of interpreting them as obstacles, you see them as part of the bridge carrying you to the confirmation of your desire. You no longer react with fear or discouragement. You respond with the knowing that nothing can contradict the internal reality you have accepted. Temporary appearances lose their power over you. They cannot sway a mind that is grounded in completion. They are simply passing forms that will rearrange themselves to match your inner conviction. Throughout the day, your imagination becomes your silent companion. Whenever the mind begins to drift, gently return to the feeling of, "It happened." Let your inner world reflect the joy and gratitude of someone whose victory is assured. This does not require intense concentration, it requires willingness. Each time you return to the fulfilled state, you deepen your alignment with the outcome. You are reinforcing the identity that makes the physical manifestation inevitable. As the hours pass, you may find yourself naturally anticipating positive outcomes. You look at the world differently, not with skepticism, but with expectancy. You see possibilities where you once saw limits. You notice ideas, opportunities, and intuitive nudges that you previously ignored. These are the natural consequences of shifting your state. The outer world begins to respond to your internal transformation. Conversations line up, circumstances rearrange. Events unfold in ways that bring your fulfillment closer into physical form. By the time you reach evening, the feeling of living from the end becomes familiar. You are no longer dipping in and out of the state. You are dwelling in it. As you reflect on the day, notice how your internal posture has changed. Notice how much lighter your thoughts feel, how your emotional landscape has shifted, how your sense of self has risen. This is evidence that the identity of abundance is taking root. When you go to sleep, let the fulfilled state be the final impression upon your mind. Drift into rest with the quiet conviction that your desire is not a future possibility, but a present reality awaiting physical expression. Sleep in the assumption of having, not longing. As you surrender to the night, your subconscious continues the work you began during the day, reinforcing the identity that makes the manifestation certain. The win becomes inevitable not because of luck or chance, but because you are consistently living as the person for whom the desire is already complete. The outer world cannot help but mirror the inner truth you sustain. The more naturally you inhabit this state, the faster the physical world aligns. You are no longer waiting for the win. You are living from it, and when you live from it, it must appear.